Picture this: the sky darkens as the great hero Hercules stands at the crossroads of his destiny, the weight of 12 impossible tasks pressing upon his shoulders. The air crackles with divine energy, the gods themselves holding their breath to see if a mortal can defy fate. This isn't just a story, it's a moment frozen in time, a glimpse into the raw power of ancient mythology, where gods walked among men, monsters lurked in shadows, and heroes battled forces beyond imagination. These tales weren't just entertainment, they were the lifeblood of civilizations, shaping cultures, explaining the unexplainable, and revealing the deepest fears and dreams of humanity. From the misty highlands of Celtic lore to the sun-baked temples of Egypt, every culture wove its own tapestry of myths, stories of creation and destruction, love and betrayal, triumph and tragedy. Think of the thunderous clash of the Norse gods at Ragnarök, the bittersweet flight of Icarus toward the sun, or the haunting beauty of Orpheus's doomed quest to bring his love back from the underworld. These aren't just dusty old legends. They're mirrors reflecting our own struggles, our hopes, and the timeless questions that haunt us all. What does it mean to be brave, to love, to defy the impossible? Today, we're embarking on a journey through 30 of the most unforgettable tales from ancient mythology, stories that have echoed across millennia, leaving their mark on art, literature, and even the way we see the world. You'll witness the cunning of trickster gods, the fury of scorned deities, and the heart-stopping courage of mortals who dared to challenge the divine. Some of these stories will lift you up, others will shatter your heart. But one thing's certain, by the end, you'll see these ancient myths not as distant fables, but as living, breathing pieces of our shared human spirit. So settle in, the gods are waiting. Before time had a name, before gods walked the earth, there was only chaos, an endless, swirling void of nothingness. But from that emptiness something stirred, the first breath of existence, and with it came Gaia, the earth itself, rising solid and sure from the formless dark. She birthed Uranus, the starry sky, whose vast expanse arched over her like a lover. Together they filled the void with mountains and oceans, with wind and light. But theirs was no peaceful union. Uranus, fearing the children Gaia bore him, the towering titans, the one-eyed cyclopes, the monstrous hecatoncheires with their 100 grasping hands, forced them back into her womb, burying them deep within the earth. The agony of this injustice twisted through Gaia like a knife, so she forged a sickle of adamant and whispered to her youngest son, Cronus, "Take this. End his cruelty." And when Uranus descended to embrace Gaia once more, Cronus struck, severing his father's power and casting it into the sea. From those bloody drops rose the Furies, avengers of wrongs, while the foam birthed Aphrodite, goddess of love, beauty born from violence. This wasn't just a story of creation. It was a blueprint for the Greek world, where order wrestled chaos, where betrayal and vengeance shaped the cosmos. The primordial forces, Gaia's endurance, Uranus' tyranny, Cronus' rebellion, echoed in every storm, every harvest, every human struggle. And the Greeks weren't alone in seeing the world this way. The Babylonians told of Tiamat's split body forming heaven and earth. The Norse sang of Ymir's flesh molding the land. Even modern science speaks of a universe born from chaos, stars igniting in the dark. Look at the art left behind, ancient vases where Gaia's body stretches into hills, temple friezes where titans clash with gods. These weren't just decorations. They were maps of meaning, showing a world where creation wasn't clean or kind, but alive with conflict, and from that conflict, life surged forward. The heavens trembled when Prometheus made his choice. Zeus, king of the gods, had withheld fire from humanity, leaving them shivering in the dark, gnawing raw meat, their potential locked away like a caged bird. But Prometheus, the titan who'd fought beside Zeus in the war against the old gods, couldn't bear their suffering. So he crept into Olympus, hollowed out a fennel stalk, and stole a glowing ember from the divine forge. With that single spark, everything changed. Flames crackled in human hearts for the first time, forging tools, baking bread, pushing back the night. It was more than warmth, it was knowledge, progress, the very essence of civilization itself. Zeus's rage was a storm without end. This wasn't just about fire. It was about defiance. The gods had demanded submission, but Prometheus had given mortals the power to shape their own destiny, so the punishment had to be unforgettable. Hephaestus, the smith god, wept as he chained Prometheus to a desolate mountain peak. Every dawn, an eagle tore into his liver, feasting while the Titan screamed. Every night the wound healed, only for the agony to begin again at sunrise. Centuries passed, the wind howled, the sun burned, but Prometheus never begged for mercy. Aeschylus, the great Greek playwright, captured this defiance in his tragedy Prometheus Bound. His Prometheus isn't just a suffering rebel, he's a prophet, knowing Zeus's reign will one day crumble. He's the unbroken voice whispering, "Better to be chained to this rock than kneel to a tyrant." That spirit echoes through history in Frankenstein's monster, who calls Prometheus his father, in the torch of the Statue of Liberty, even in modern tales of a surpassing its creators. Theft of fire wasn't just a myth, it became shorthand for any dangerous, world-shifting gift. If you want to see his torment brought to life, hunt for animations of Prometheus's punishment. The best ones don't shy away from the horror, the clang of chains, the shadow of wings, the blood on the rocks, but look closer and you'll spot the moment his lips curl into a smile. Because even in agony he'd won, humanity kept the fire. The gods called her a gift, but the mortals who first saw Pandora knew better. Crafted from clay by Hephaestus, adorned with beauty by Aphrodite, and filled with cunning whispers by Hermes, she was Zeus's vengeance for Prometheus's stolen fire. In Hesiod's works and days, she's described as a beautiful evil, a punishment wrapped in grace. The gods presented her with a jar, not a box, as mistranslations later claimed, and one simple command: never open it. But curiosity, that spark Prometheus had gifted humanity, burned too bright. The moment the gods turned away, Pandora lifted the lid. Out flew every misery known to man: disease, despair, famine, winged shadows blotting out the sun. By the time she slammed it shut, only one thing remained inside: hope. Was she a villain, as Hesiod claimed, the root of all suffering, or a victim, a pawn in the gods' cruel game? Ancient vase paintings capture the moment with startling clarity. Pandora in flowing robes, her face a mix of wonder and dread as horrors spiral into the world. One 5th century vase in the Ashmolean Museum even shows her clutching the jar like a child caught in mischief, her eyes wide with realization. The Greeks debated her legacy for centuries. Was hope left in the jar a mercy, a lifeline to endure the evil she'd released? Or was it the cruelest torment of all, trapping humanity in endless anticipation? Modern retellings twist the knife further. Margaret Atwood's The Penelopiad reimagines Pandora as a scapegoat, her name meaning all gifted yet blamed for all losses. Even scientific jargon nods to her myth. The Pandora's box metaphor warns of unpredictable consequences, from genetic engineering to AI. Find an artist's rendition online, perhaps the pre-Raphaelite paintings where she glows like a saint, or contemporary animations where the escaping plagues swirl like a dark galaxy. Each version asks the same question: are we defined by the evils unleashed upon us, or by the hope we cling to despite them? Hesiod's farmers may have cursed her name, but poets centuries later whispered a different truth. Without Pandora's moment of weakness, humanity would never have learned to rise. The weight of Hercules' guilt pressed heavier than the lion's pelt on his shoulders. Madness, sent by the goddess Hera, had once gripped his mind, driving him to slaughter his own wife and children. When the fog of rage lifted, all that remained was ash and unbearable remorse. To atone, the Oracle of Delphi sent him to his cousin Eurystheus, a petty king who relished his chance to humble the demigod. 12 labors, 12 near impossible tasks. Each one carved into history not just as a trial of strength, but as a journey through the darkest corners of the human soul. First came the Nemean lion, its golden fur impervious to weapons. Hercules fought it barehanded, strangling the beast with his own arms, then wearing its pelt as armor, a symbol of turning his greatest adversary into protection. Next, the many-headed Hydra. For every head he crushed, two more sprouted in its place. Only by searing the stumps with fire could he stop the regeneration, proving that brute force alone couldn't conquer every problem. Then the Cyrenian hind, a stag sacred to Artemis, so swift it outran arrows. Hercules chased it for a year, not to kill but to capture it unharmed, a lesson in patience and reverence. But some labors whispered of deeper mysteries. The Stymphalian birds, metallic winged creatures terrorizing the marshes, were scattered by a rattle forged by Hephaestus. The sound alone drove them to madness, showing how chaos could be weaponized. The Orgion stables, clogged with decades of filth, seemed a mockery until Hercules diverted 2 rivers to cleanse them in a day. Even the dirtiest sins, the myth hinted, could be purged with ingenuity. Then came the apples of the Hesperides, a labor shrouded in twilight. The golden apples grew in a garden at the edge of the world, guarded by a dragon and the nymphs of evening. Hercules couldn't steal them alone. He bargained with Atlas, the Titan holding up the sky, offering to shoulder the heavens in exchange. When Atlas tried to abandon him, Hercules tricked the Titan back into his burden. Some scholars see this as the climax of his trials, not a test of muscle, but of wit and the willingness to bear impossible weight. Art immortalized each labor in marble and bronze. The Farnese Hercules, a slumped giant weary from his labors, captures his exhaustion. Roman mosaics split the tasks into panels like a comic strip of agony and triumph. If you search online for reconstructions, you'll find digital montages where the lion's roar shakes the screen, or the Hydra's heads writhe as if alive. These weren't just adventures, they were allegories for every human struggle against nature, against fate, against the monsters within. By the 12th labor, dragging Cerberus from the underworld, Hercules had done more than cleanse his guilt. He'd shown that even the damned could claw their way back into the light. The walls of the labyrinth stretched high and endless, their twisting corridors echoing with the bellows of something monstrous lurking in the dark. Theseus, Prince of Athens, stepped inside with nothing but a sword and the weight of his people's suffering on his shoulders. Every year, 14 youths had been sent to Crete as tribute sacrifices to King Minos' terrible secret. The Minotaur, a half-man, half-bull horror born from the queen's shame and a god's cruel trick. But this time the cycle would break. Ariadne, Minos' own daughter, had handed Theseus a lifeline, a simple ball of thread. "Unwind it as you go," she whispered. So the path back can never be lost. The myth thrums with layers of meaning. That thread wasn't just string, it was trust, cunning, the fragile tether between destruction and salvation. And the Minotaur, more than a monster, its birth traced back to Poseidon's vengeance, a gleaming white bull sent to test Minos, who broke his oath and kept the beast for himself. In fury, the god made Minos' queen, Pasiphae, fall into unnatural love with the animal. Their offspring, imprisoned in the labyrinth, became a symbol of buried shame and the cost of arrogance. Archaeologists at Knossos, the sprawling palace on Crete, found frescoes of bull-leaping athletes somersaulting over charging beasts in a deadly dance. Was this the kernel of truth behind the myth? Some scholars think the Minotaur represents a fallen athlete or a corrupt priest of the bull cult. Others point to the palace's maze-like corridors where visitors could easily lose their way as inspiration for the labyrinth. A map overlay of Crete reveals something startling. The island's shape mirrors the spirals found on ancient Minoan seals, the same pattern some say guided Theseus through the dark. Modern retellings twist the tale further. Novelists like Mary Renault paint Ariadne not as a love-struck girl, but a priestess wielding her own power. Video games like Assassin's Creed Odyssey let players navigate a digital labyrinth, the Minotaur's roar vibrating through the controller. Each version asks who was the real monster. The beast in the maze or the king who fed it children. Theseus slew the Minotaur, but he left Ariadne behind on an island, a betrayal that would haunt him. The lesson lingers: escape the labyrinth and you might still lose your way. Polydex thought he'd sent Perseus to his death when he demanded the head of Medusa as a wedding gift. What chance did a mortal have against a Gorgon whose gaze turned men to stone, whose hair writhed with venomous snakes, whose very name meant guardian in ancient Greek, a twisted protector who petrified all who sought her? But the gods had other plans. Athena, who'd once cursed Medusa for the crime of being violated in her temple, now gifted Perseus a polished bronze shield. Hermes lent his winged sandals. Hades offered a helm of invisibility. Even the nymphs contributed a curved sword and a sack to carry the severed head. Every piece of divine aid whispered the same truth. This wasn't just a hero's quest, it was a reckoning. Perseus found Medusa in her cavern, surrounded by the stony remains of past intruders. He didn't look directly at her instead. He used the shield as a mirror, watching her reflection as he crept closer. The moment her serpent hair hissed in warning, his blade flashed. Blood soaked the sand as her head tumbled into the sack, and from her neck sprang Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, the golden giant children of Poseidon's earlier assault on her. The irony stung. Even in death, Medusa's body birthed legends. But who was she really? Early versions like Hesiod's Theogony paint her as a monster from birth, one of 3 Gorgon sisters. Later, Ovid's Metamorphoses reframed her as a beautiful priestess raped by Poseidon in Athena's temple, punished by the goddess with snakes for hair and a deadly gaze. This shift transformed Medusa from a mindless terror into a tragic figure, her power born from trauma. Modern feminists reclaimed her as a symbol of survival, her face emblazoned on shields and protest signs as a warning against victim blaming. Even the medical term Gorgon stare describes paralysis from fear or shock, proving how deeply her myth seeped into our psyche. No artwork captures her duality like Caravaggio's Medusa. Painted on a ceremonial shield, her severed head screams in agony, snakes twisting wildly as blood drips from her neck. Yet her face remains hauntingly human, wide-eyed, almost vulnerable. The painting doesn't just show a monster's death, it freezes the moment where terror and pity collide. Search for high-resolution details online, and you'll notice the reflection of Perseus in her pupils, the killer forever trapped in his victim's gaze. From ancient amphory to modern tattoos, Medusa's image endures because she refuses to be just one thing: a monster, a victim, a warning, a weapon. Her story forces us to ask who gets to decide what makes someone monstrous. And what happens when the feared finally fights back? The cry of a single man echoed across the blood-soaked plains of Troy, a scream of grief so raw it froze an entire war. Achilles, the greatest warrior of the Greek army, had just learned of his beloved Patroclus' death at the hands of Hector, Prince of Troy. In that moment, rage became his only language. He threw himself back into battle, not for glory or king, but for vengeance. This wasn't just a clash of armies anymore. It was the heart of Homer's Iliad laid bare, how love and fury could unravel even the gods' carefully woven plans. For 9 long years, the Greeks had besieged Troy, all because of a stolen Queen Helen, whose face launched 1,000 ships. But the war's true turning point came when pride and grief collided. Achilles, insulted by King Agamemnon, had withdrawn from battle, leaving the Greeks to falter. Without him, Patroclus donned Achilles' armor to rally the troops, only to be cut down by Hector. The moment Achilles returned, clad in new armor forged by Hephaestus himself, the tide turned irrevocably. Hector, a hero bound by duty to defend his city, faced him outside the walls in a duel that would decide Troy's fate. Their fight wasn't just physical, it was a debate etched in steel. Hector, the family man begging for dignity in death. Achilles, the broken warrior who dragged his enemy's body behind his chariot, defying even the gods' pleas for mercy. Then came the horse, a towering wooden gift left on the shore, its hollow belly packed with Greek soldiers while the rest sailed away, feigning retreat. The Trojans, believing the war ended, dragged it inside their walls, only to learn too late that some gifts are curses in disguise. That night, the Greeks emerged, slaughtering the unsuspecting city. Was it Odysseus's cunning, Athena's divine intervention, or the tragic flaw of human trust? The answer depends on which ancient poet you ask, but was Troy real? For centuries, scholars dismissed it as myth until a German archaeologist named Heinrich Schliemann, armed with Homer's verses like a treasure map, unearthed a layered city in modern-day Turkey. Charred walls, bronze weapons, evidence of a catastrophic siege around 1280 B.C. The debate still rages, was this the Troy? The truth may lie somewhere between legend and history, where kernels of real conflict were polished into epic. Film adaptations magnify these moments. Watch Brad Pitt's Achilles in Troy, his duel with Hector shot in trembling close-ups that make the warriors' breaths as loud as their swords, or the claustrophobic horror of the wooden horse sequence in Helen of Troy, where the creak of hidden soldiers is drowned by Trojan celebrations. These retellings remind us that the war's power doesn't come from battles alone, but from the faces in the crowd, the grief of Hector's wife Andromache, the desperation of Helen as she watches cities burn for her beauty. The war ended with Troy in ashes, but the stories refused to die. Virgil's Aeneid follows survivors like Aeneas fleeing to found Rome. Modern novels like The Song of Achilles reframe Patroclus and Achilles as lovers, their bond the true casualty of pride. Even today, calling something a Trojan horse warns of hidden danger, from computer viruses to political deception. The tale endures because it asks the unanswerable. What makes a hero? When does vengeance become justice? And how many lives are worth a single moment of love or pride? The walls of Troy may have fallen, but the echoes of its war still shape how we understand sacrifice, honor, and the price of obsession. The cave smelled of roasted flesh and sour milk, the air thick with the breath of something far from human. Odysseus and his men huddled behind a pile of boulders, watching the firelight flicker off the walls as the Cyclops Polyphemus, a massive shepherd with a single eye burning like embers in his forehead, devoured two of their comrades. This wasn't just a monster's lair, it was a trap of their own making. They'd entered the cave seeking supplies, feasting on the Cyclops' cheese and wine, only to become his next meal when he returned. But Odysseus, the man whose very name meant trouble, had a plan brewing behind his terrified smile. When Polyphemus demanded his name, Odysseus didn't lie, not exactly. He called himself Nobody, a wordplay that would soon become his weapon. Later, when the men heated a sharpened olive stake in the fire and plunged it into the Cyclops' eye, the monster's howls brought his kin running. "Who hurt you?" they shouted from outside the cave. "Nobody." Polyphemus roared back, and the others left, shrugging off his agony as divine punishment. The Greeks clung to the undersides of sheep as the blinded giant felt each animal's fleece, never thinking to check beneath. By the time Odysseus taunted Polyphemus from his ship, revealing his real name with a hubris that would haunt his voyage home, the Cyclops was hurling boulders into the sea, cursing him to Poseidon. The brilliance of the Nobody trick wasn't just in its deception, it exposed the limits of brute strength against cunning. Polyphemus wasn't some mindless beast. In Homer's Odyssey, he's a pastoral figure with flocks and cave etiquette, his savagery balanced by a twisted hospitality. Earlier versions of Cyclops in Hesiod's Theogony were divine blacksmiths who forged Zeus's thunderbolts, their single eye symbolizing focused craftsmanship. So why did Homer's Cyclops become a man-eating terror? Some scholars point to volcanic islands like Sicily, where Polyphemus was said to dwell. The boulders he threw match volcanic projectiles, his fiery eye echoing eruptions. Others see echoes of ancient fear, tales of real nomadic tribes with ritual eye coverings or skull deformities exaggerated over centuries into myth. Modern retellings twist the scene's morality. Was Odysseus the clever hero or a thief who provoked a host's wrath? James Joyce's Ulysses reimagines Polyphemus as a bigoted nationalist, his single eye a metaphor for narrow-mindedness. Animated versions like Sinbad, Legend of the Seven Seas turn the cave escape into a literal cliffhanger, the Cyclops' roars shaking the screen. Even today, calling someone a Cyclops implies not just size but a dangerous singularity of vision, unable to see the full picture. To grasp the terror of that cave, find John Flaxman's stark black and white illustrations. Odysseus's men dwarfed by the Cyclops' shadow, their faces etched with primal fear. Or listen to audio dramas where Polyphemus's voice booms like grinding stone, the word nobody echoing like a joke with a bloody punchline. This story sticks because it's more than an adventure, it's a lesson in the cost of cleverness. Odysseus saved his men, but his arrogance cursed his journey home. The Cyclops may have lost his eye, but Poseidon's vengeance would make the hero wish he'd never given his real name at all. The music of Orpheus could make rivers pause in their courses and trees uproot themselves to follow him, yet not even his divine gift could undo death's finality. When his beloved Eurydice, bitten by a viper on their wedding day, vanished into the underworld, Orpheus did the unthinkable. He walked past the gates of Hades itself, his lyre's melodies softening the hearts of shades and monsters alike. Even the Iron Throne of Persephone, queen of the dead, trembled at his song. Moved by his grief, she offered him a bargain no mortal had ever received. Eurydice could return to the living world, but only if Orpheus led her without looking back until they reached the sunlight. A single glance and she would be lost forever. The moment of his failure has haunted artists for millennia. Just steps from the surface, doubt coiled around Orpheus like a serpent. Was she truly behind him? Had the gods tricked him? He turned, and there she was, her fingers already dissolving into mist, her cry of farewell echoing as she was torn back into the abyss. Not even his second descent to the underworld could bring her back. The gates remained sealed to him now. Grief-stricken, he wandered until Maenads, frenzied followers of Dionysus, tore him apart for spurning their advances. His head, still singing as it floated down the river, washed ashore on Lesbos where Apollo finally silenced it. Gluck's opera Orpheus and Eurydice crystallizes the tragedy in aria after aching aria. The famous chief pharaoh censer Eurydice, "What will I do without Eurydice?" isn't just a lament, it's the sound of a man realizing his love is gone because of his own hands. Modern adaptations amplify the torment. Animated shorts like the tragedy of Orpheus and Eurydice use stark shadows to show the exact instant her form unravels, her eyes locking with his in betrayal. For moody underworld visuals, seek out Gustave Doré's engravings, the couple's outstretched hands nearly touching in the gloom, or the spectral boatman Charon poling his vessel through a sea of reaching souls. But why does this myth endure? Freud saw Orpheus's glance as the human inability to resist obsession. Poets like Rilke rewrote the ending, suggesting Eurydice welcomed her return to darkness, freed from his clinging need. Even science nods to the tale. The Orpheus effect in VR describes the impulse to turn and check if a virtual companion is still following. At its core, the story isn't about failure. It's about the unbearable weight of almost, the sunlight on Orpheus's face as he stepped into it alone, the silence after the music ends. The banks of the Tiber River ran red the day Romulus buried his brother's body in the freshly plowed dirt. The twins, born of the war god Mars and a Vestal virgin condemned to death, had been raised by a she-wolf, her milk their first sustenance, her den their cradle. Found by the shepherd Faustulus, they grew into natural leaders, their divine blood calling men to follow them. But when the time came to found their city, a single disagreement turned brother against brother. Romulus traced sacred furrows around the Palatine Hill, vowing to kill any who crossed them. Remus, laughing at the meager walls, leaped over in defiance. In that heartbeat, Romulus struck him down, becoming both Rome's first king and its first murderer. This wasn't just a story of sibling rivalry. The Romans saw Romulus's act as the brutal birth pangs of empire order forged through violence. The Capitoline wolf statue, cast in bronze centuries later with the twins suckling beneath her, became the ultimate symbol of their origins, nurtured by ferocity, destined to rule. But look closer and cracks appear in the legend. Some historians argue Remus's death echoes older rituals, the sacrificial killing of a twin to sanctify new settlements. Others note that early Roman kingship often involved fratricide, suggesting the myth justified brutal political norms. Rome had other founding tales, each revealing different facets of its identity. The exiled Trojan prince Aeneas, carrying his father from burning Troy to Italian shores, offered a noble lineage connecting Rome to Homeric epic. The Sabine women's abduction, where Romans seized neighbors' daughters to populate the city, laid bare the pragmatic ruthlessness of a people who would rather steal than fade away. Even the date of Rome's founding, April 21st, celebrated with the Parilia festival, tied the city's birth to the springtime cleansing of sheepfolds, blending pastoral roots with imperial ambition. Modern archaeology adds tantalizing layers. Excavations on the Palatine uncovered Iron Age huts matching the timeline of Rome's legendary founding. A black stone marker in the Roman Forum, long believed to cover Romulus's tomb, was recently shown to align with an ancient shrine to the first king. But perhaps the most haunting evidence is the Capitoline wolf herself. Carbon dating revealed the bronze wolf likely dates to the 11th or 12th century, while the twin figures beneath her were added in the 15th century, proving how even icons evolved to serve the stories we need to tell. From Shakespeare's Coriolanus to modern films like Romulus and Remus, the First King, retellings grapple with the twins' legacy. Video games like Rise, Son of Rome reimagined the she-wolf as a protector spirit, her eyes glowing with otherworldly fire. Yet the core question remains, does a nation built on violence carry that seed forever? Romulus's Rome would drown the world in blood and glory, its empire stretching from Britannia to Babylon. And at its heart, always, the image of two boys and the wolf who taught them to survive no matter the cost. Smoke choked the air as Aeneas staggered through the ruins of Troy, his city collapsing in flames around him. The wooden horse had done its work. Greek soldiers poured from its belly like rats from a gutted ship, slaughtering all in their path. But amid the carnage, the Trojan prince carried a far heavier burden than his father Anchises, whom he hefted onto his shoulders, or his young son Ascanius, whose hand he gripped tightly. The gods had tasked him with an impossible duty, to escape the ashes of his home and found a new kingdom that would one day rule the world. This wasn't just a flight for survival. It was the first step in Virgil's Aeneid, Rome's answer to Homer's epics, a story where destiny mattered more than glory and piety trumped pride. Aeneas's wanderings mirrored Odysseus's in reverse. Both sailed the wine-dark sea, dodging monsters and temptations, but where Odysseus fought to return home, Aeneas sought a home that didn't yet exist. Storms drove his fleet to Carthage, where Queen Dido welcomed the exiles with open arms. Their love story burns at the heart of the epic, a passionate, doomed affair. When the gods reminded Aeneas of his duty, he abandoned Dido to continue his journey. Her curse, sworn as she threw herself onto a funeral pyre, would echo through history. Let there be no love between our peoples. Rome and Carthage's future wars, Virgil suggests, were born from this moment of heartbreak. Virgil's genius lay in weaving Roman propaganda into myth. Odysseus's cleverness becomes Aeneas's steadfastness. Achilles' rage transforms into the Trojan's self-sacrifice. Even the underworld gets a rewrite. Where Homer's Hades is a shadowy limbo, Virgil's Elysium offers a breathtaking vision. Aeneas's descendants from Romulus to Caesar, parading before him like a divine family tree. The message was clear: Rome's empire wasn't built on chance. It was fated, blessed by the gods themselves. To grasp the scale of Aeneas's journey, picture a map tracing his path: Troy's smoldering ruins, the whirlpool of Charybdis, the volcanic fury of Mount Etna, and finally, the Tiber's muddy banks where Rome would rise. Animated overlays could show his fleet shrinking from 20 ships to a handful, each storm and battle whittling his people down to the hardiest survivors. Dido's death remains one of literature's most haunting scenes. Artists like Turner painted her pyre as a beacon in the night, its flames licking at Carthage towers. Opera composers like Purcell turned her lament, "When I am laid in earth," into a masterpiece of Baroque grief. Yet Aeneas presses on, past the grieving queen's ghost in the underworld, past the war with Turnus in Italy, until he stands on the land the gods promised. His victory feels hollow compared to Homer's triumphs, no joyous homecoming, just the weary knowledge that his struggles planted seeds others would harvest. The Aeneid asks uncomfortable questions. What does it cost to build a civilization? Can duty ever justify betrayal? Modern parallels abound: refugees fleeing fallen cities, leaders sacrificing personal happiness for collective futures. Virgil's epic endures not because it's triumphant, but because it's tangled. Aeneas wins his destiny, but unlike Odysseus, he never gets to stop wandering. Before time split into days and nights, before frost and fire found their names, there was only Ginnungagap, the yawning void where nothing existed except silence and potential. Then came the sparks of Muspelheim, the realm of fire, licking at the icy walls of Niflheim. Where heat met cold, the giant Ymir stirred to life, his body oozing with sweat that birthed more giants. This wasn't creation through careful design, as in the Greek myths where Gaia rose from chaos to shape the world. This was raw, chaotic genesis, the universe building itself from the bones of a slain giant. Odin and his brothers, the first of the Aesir gods, slit Ymir's throat and dragged his corpse into the emptiness. His flesh became the earth, his blood the seas, his bones the mountains. His skull arched into the sky, held up by 4 dwarves named after the cardinal directions. Even his eyebrows were repurposed, forming the walls of Midgard, the realm of humans. But here's where the Norse vision diverges sharply from other myths. This world wasn't static. It was alive, bound by the roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree, whose branches cradled 9 realms, from Asgard's golden halls to Hel's frozen wastes. Carvings on Viking runestones depict the tree as a twisting axis, serpent dragons gnawing at its roots as a deer nibbles its leaves. Every part of existence was interconnected, every action rippling through the cosmos. The most striking difference: the Norse didn't believe in an eternal golden age or a linear march toward progress. Their universe was cyclical, destined to end in Ragnarök, the doom of the gods, where Fenrir the wolf would swallow the sun, the sea would rise to drown the land, and brothers would turn blades on one another. Yet even this apocalypse wasn't final. From the ashes, a new world would emerge, green and fresh, where 2 human survivors would repopulate the earth. This wasn't just fatalism, it was a call to courage. Why fear death if even the gods march toward their end with heads held high? Look at the surviving illustrations of Yggdrasil, like the intricate carvings on the Urvahogdal tapestry. The tree isn't just a symbol, it's a roadmap. Its roots dive into wells of wisdom, fate, and primordial memory. Its branches host realms like Alfheim, home of the light elves, and Jotunheim, where frost giants plot vengeance. Animations of the 9 worlds often show them as floating orbs strung along the tree's trunk, spinning in delicate balance. The Vikings didn't see themselves as the center of creation, but as threads in a vast, living web. The myth's brutality and beauty still resonate. Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology retells Ymir's slaughter with dark humor: Odin and his brothers wading through rivers of blood, slipping on cartilage. Video games like God of War reimagine the world tree as a physical pathway, its bark etched with glowing runes. Even Marvel's Thor movies borrow the cyclical dread of Ragnarok, though they sand off the edges. The original myths offered no such comfort. When Odin sacrifices an eye for wisdom or Tyr loses a hand to bind Fenrir, it's a reminder. In this universe, creation and destruction are two sides of the same coin. To live knowing the world will end isn't despair, it's defiance. The waves crashed against the hull of the fishing boat with enough force to split ordinary wood, but this was no ordinary vessel. Thor, god of thunder, had disguised himself as a mortal fisherman, his red beard bristling with barely contained excitement as he gripped the fishing line. His companion, the giant Ymir, watched with growing unease. They weren't hunting cod or mackerel. Thor's bait, a bull's head, roasted and stinking, tied to a hook the size of an anchor. The sea churned ominously as something colossal took the bait. Then, with a yank that nearly capsized the boat, the water exploded. Jörmungandr, the world serpent, burst from the depths, its scales glistening like poisoned emeralds, its fangs dripping venom that hissed where it struck the waves. This wasn't just a fishing trip, it was a collision of cosmic forces. Jörmungandr, Loki's monstrous child, had grown so large it could encircle Midgard and bite its own tail. Thor, destined to slay the beast at Ragnarok, now faced it centuries early, his hammer Mjolnir raised high. The scene crackles with contradictions, the absurdity of a god playing angler, the sheer pettiness of Thor's goal, he just wanted to impress Ymir at dinner, and the apocalyptic stakes lurking beneath the surface. Viking poets loved these contrasts. One moment, Thor is screaming insults at the serpent. The next, the boat's planks are splintering as Jörmungandr's weight drags them toward the abyss. Ymir, realizing he's caught in a divine grudge match, panics and cuts the line, sending the serpent sinking back into the sea. Thor's bellow of frustration shakes the clouds, but the encounter is a preview of doom. When they meet again at Ragnarok, neither will walk away. Archaeology adds eerie context. Viking Age carvings show Thor's fishing trip as a favorite motif, the serpent's coils often mirroring the Midgard serpent's role as a boundary between worlds. Some depictions even show Thor's foot crashing through the boat's hull, a detail from lost oral tales. The myth isn't just adventure, it's a lesson in inevitability. Thor can't cheat fate, no matter how hard he yanks the line. To visualize the chaos, hunt for animations of the scene. The best ones capture the moment Jörmungandr's eye, a slitted abyss of ancient hatred, locks onto Thor before the strike. Others lean into the dark comedy. Thor's exaggerated pout as Ymir ruins his chance at glory, or the serpent's smug retreat into the depths. Even Marvel's Thor, Ragnarok nods to the myth, though it swaps the serpent for a confused alien beast. Why does this tale endure? Because it's Norse mythology in a nutshell, brutality and laughter sharing the same boat. Thor's failure here foreshadows his Pyrrhic victory at Ragnarok, where he'll kill Jörmungandr only to stagger 9 steps and die from its venom. The gods know how their stories end, yet they rage, joke, and fish anyway. That's the Viking spirit, facing the inevitable with a grin and a death grip on your hammer. Loki's children were never meant to be cradled in arms or sung lullabies. From the moment they writhed into existence, each carried a curse woven into their very bones, destined to become the architects of the god's doom. Fenrir, the monstrous wolf, grew so rapidly that even the Aesir's strongest chains could barely contain him. Jörmungandr, the serpent, was tossed into the ocean by Odin, only to expand until it circled the entire world, biting its own tail. And Hel, half alive, half corpse, was banished to rule a shadowy realm where those who died of sickness or old age wandered as whispering shades. These weren't just offspring, they were living omens, proof that Loki's chaos couldn't be contained. The myths paint Loki's role with unsettling ambiguity. He wasn't a straightforward villain but a shapeshifter in every sense, sometimes aiding the gods with clever schemes, other times orchestrating their ruin. When the Aesir demanded Fenrir be bound, it was Loki who suggested the magical ribbon Gleipnir, crafted from impossibilities like a cat's footsteps and a mountain's roots. Yet the moment Fenrir snapped his jaws in betrayal, realizing the gods had tricked him, Loki's loyalty splintered like ice underfoot. The wolf's fangs tore off Tyr's hand, a sacrifice that foreshadowed Ragnarok's greater losses. Medieval manuscripts like the Prose Edda depict these moments with chilling starkness. Illustrations show Fenrir's muzzle straining against Gleipnir, his eyes burning with a mix of rage and hurt. Jörmungandr coils around maps of Midgard, its body forming a perfect, suffocating circle. Hel stands at the threshold of her realm, one side of her face flushed with life, the other sagging like rotting fruit. These images weren't mere decoration, they were warnings. Viking audiences would have recognized the dread in Tyr's grimace as he placed his hand in Fenrir's mouth, understanding that even bravery couldn't stave off fate. What makes these tales so enduring is their refusal to simplify Loki's role. He mourned when the gods imprisoned his children, yet his actions kept feeding the cycle of vengeance. When Baldur, the beloved god of light, died because of Loki's manipulation, it wasn't just malice, it was the inevitable unraveling of a system built on distrust. The poetic Edda's Lokasana captures this duality perfectly. Loki sits at the gods' feast, hurling insults that expose their hypocrisy, a mirror they can't shatter. Modern retellings amplify these tensions. Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology frames Fenrir's binding as a tragedy, the wolf's howls echoing with betrayal. Video games like God of War reimagine Hel as a melancholy ruler, her realm a frozen wasteland where lost souls wander. Even Marvel's Thor films, despite softening Loki's edges, hint at the familial devastation, his children's absence a gaping void in his story. The deeper truth, Loki's offspring aren't just monsters. Fenrir is the rage of the oppressed, Jörmungandr the consequences of discarded sins, Hel the dignity of the forgotten dead. They remind us that even gods can't escape the chaos they create, and that every chain, no matter how cleverly forged, will one day break. Long before the pyramids cast their shadows across the Nile, there was only none, an endless, dark ocean where no shore existed. No light pierced the depths, and time itself lay dormant. Then from that nothingness a spark flickered. Atum, the first god, willed himself into being, rising like a solitary island from the cosmic waters. This wasn't just creation, it was an act of sheer determination, a deity conjuring himself from his own desire. The ancient texts describe him as both male and female, a paradox contained within a single being, because in the beginning, what need was there for divisions? Atum's first act was to speak his children into existence. With a thought, he spat forth Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture. This wasn't a gentle birth, it was an expulsion of raw divine energy, the kind that fractures silence into life. Shu and Tefnut, in turn, birthed Geb, the earth, whose laughter made mountains rise, and Nut, the sky, whose body arched over the world like a protective mother. Their love was so fierce that Atum had to forcibly separate them, lifting Nut high above Geb to prevent them from merging eternally. This separation wasn't cruelty, it was necessity. Without space between earth and sky, there would be no room for humanity, for cities, for civilization itself. Heliopolis, the center of Atum's worship, enshrined this myth in towering obelisks and intricate hieroglyphs. One temple carving shows Atum as a serpent shedding its skin, a symbol of renewal, of creation cycling endlessly. Another depicts him as the setting sun, merging with the god Khepri at dawn to become Ra, the solar disk whose journey across the sky mirrored Atum's own emergence from chaos. This blending of identities wasn't confusion, it was theology in motion, showing that creation and the sun's daily rebirth were one and the same. The brilliance of this myth lies in its layers. Atum's self-creation mirrors the sunrise, each dawn a repetition of the first moment, when light clawed its way out of darkness. The Aeneid, the 9 gods born from him, weren't just family, they were a divine blueprint. Shu's air-filled lungs, Tefnut's moisture became the Nile's floods, Jeb's body grew crops, and Nut's stars guided the dead to the afterlife. Even the primordial Nun wasn't truly gone. It lingered at the edges of the world, a reminder that chaos could return if the gods faltered. Modern scholars still debate the nuances. Some see Atum's spitting of Shu and Tefnut as a metaphor for the creative power of divine utterance, echoing later traditions where words shape reality. Others point to the coffin text where Atum confesses, "I was alone. I could find no place to stand," highlighting the loneliness of the first act of existence. Meanwhile, the hieroglyph for Atum often includes a serpent, not just a symbol of rebirth, but a nod to the cyclical nature of time itself, where endings fold back into beginnings. To see this myth in action, examine the ceiling of the tomb of Ramses VI, where Nut stretches across the heavens, swallowing the sun each evening to give birth to it anew at dawn. Or study the Heliopolis creation texts, their columns of glyphs resembling the pillars that once held up the temple's roof, both literally and metaphorically supporting the weight of the cosmos. These weren't just stories, they were maps of meaning, showing a world where creation wasn't a one-time event but a daily choice. The sun didn't rise because it had to. It rose because Atum willed it again and again, just as he had willed himself from the dark. The banks of the Nile ran red the day Set betrayed his brother. Osiris, the green-skinned god of fertility and king of Egypt, had ruled with such wisdom that even the deserts bloomed under his touch, but Set, lord of storms and chaos, burned with envy. He crafted a sarcophagus precisely to Osiris's measurements, then announced a game at his feast. Whoever fit the golden box would keep it. When Osiris climbed inside, Set's followers slammed the lid shut, sealed it with molten lead, and hurled it into the river. The current carried it all the way to Byblos, where a tamarisk tree grew around it, swallowing the coffin whole. This wasn't just fratricide, it was the unraveling of cosmic order. Osiris's wife Isis, goddess of magic, refused to let the story end there. She wandered the world mourning until children's whispers led her to Byblos. There she disguised herself as a nursemaid to the queen, burning away the infant prince's mortality each night in secret ritual. When the queen caught her, Isis revealed her true form and demanded the tree. From its splintered trunk she pulled the coffin, and inside, Osiris's corpse, still perfect, still silent. But Set wasn't finished. He stole the body, tearing it into 14 pieces and scattering them across Egypt. Isis, with her sister Nephthys, became a kite soaring over marshlands, her piercing cries guiding her to each gruesome discovery. Wherever she found flesh, a finger in the delta, a rib in the desert, she consecrated the ground, planting the seeds of future temples. Only his phallus, eaten by a Nile fish, was lost forever. Yet through her spells, woven with the very syllables that built the universe, Isis reassembled him just long enough to conceive Horus, the falcon-headed avenger who would one day reclaim his father's throne. The myth's power rippled far beyond storytelling. Every pharaoh claimed to be Horus in life and Osiris in death, their divine right etched into temple walls. The famed judgment scene from the Book of the Dead shows Osiris enthroned in the Duat, the underworld, his green skin symbolizing rebirth as Anubis weighs a heart against Mat's feather. Tomb paintings depict this moment in lapis and gold, the hopeful dead pleading their case, the monster Ammit waiting to devour the unworthy. It wasn't just about morality, it was a political blueprint. By tying kingship to Osiris's resurrection, priests ensured no usurper like Set could ever claim legitimacy without honoring the cycle of death and renewal. Modern excavations reveal how deeply this myth permeated daily life. At Abydos, Osiris's cult center, archaeologists found Osiris beds, seed-filled molds shaped like the god, their sprouting grain mirroring his resurrection. The Dendra temple ceiling still bears Isis's outstretched wings, frozen in stone as she protects her husband. even today, farmers leave offerings where Isis wept, believing her tears swell the Nile's annual flood. To grasp the visceral horror and beauty of this tale, hunt for the judgment scene in Hunefer's papyrus. Anubis's jackal head tilts as his scale balances. Thoth's ibis beak records the verdict, and Osiris's gaze holds neither mercy nor wrath, just the terrible patience of eternity. Or explore digital reconstructions of the Abydos rituals, where actors in linen robes drag Osiris's effigy through torchlit corridors, chanting spells older than pyramids. This myth doesn't just explain death, it asks what we're willing to sacrifice for love, for justice, for a second chance. When Horus finally defeats Set, he doesn't kill him. He condemns him to forever bear the sun across the sky, a reminder that even chaos has its place, so long as order holds the scales. The sands of Egypt whisper of a book that was never meant for mortal hands, a tome so dangerous it could unravel the very fabric of the god's power. The Book of Thoth, inscribed by the ibis-headed god of wisdom himself, contained the secrets of the universe, spells to command the heavens, decipher the language of animals, and even peer beyond the veil of death. But this was no gift to humanity. Like Prometheus's fire or Eden's forbidden fruit, it represented divine knowledge too potent for mortal grasp. The difference. This wasn't a myth about stealing from the gods. It was a warning about what happens when humans reach too far and what the gods might hide from us still. One version of the tale, preserved on papyrus fragments from the Ptolemaic period, follows Prince Neferkaptah, a scholar obsessed with uncovering the book's hiding place. After years of searching, he discovers it sealed in a golden box at the bottom of the Nile, guarded by serpents that only sleep when charmed with beer-soaked bread. The moment he reads its incantations, Thoth's wrath descends. Neferkaptah watches helplessly as his wife and son drown, punishments disguised as accidents before taking his own life, the book still clutched in his hand. Their spirits linger, trapped in their tombs, reciting the very spells that doomed them. The message couldn't be clearer. Some knowledge isn't just forbidden, it's cursed. Compare this to other cautionary tales. Prometheus's fire brought progress at the cost of eternal torment. Adam and Eve's bite of wisdom exiled them from paradise. But the Book of Thoth adds a uniquely Egyptian twist. The gods here don't just punish, they erase. Neferkaptah's family vanishes from history, their names scratched off monuments. Even his ghost warns others away, begging them to leave the book buried. This wasn't just about obedience, it was about control. In a civilization where words held tangible power, where priests could literally speak statues to life, a book of unmediated divine knowledge threatened the entire hierarchy. Yet the most tantalizing question isn't why the book was forbidden. It's whether it existed at all. Ancient texts reference lost books of the gods, hidden beneath temples or encoded in star patterns. The legendary Emerald Tablet of Hermes Trismegistus, a later Greco-Egyptian text, claims to distill Thoth's wisdom into cryptic aphorisms. Even modern archaeologists speculate about the Hall of Records, a rumored vault beneath the Sphinx said to hold Atlantean or early Egyptian secrets. Whether myth or metaphor, these stories tap into a universal fear that the truest knowledge is always just out of reach, guarded by time, disaster, or divine jealousy. To visualize this, examine the few surviving depictions of Thoth. In tomb paintings, he records the weighing of hearts in the afterlife, his scribe's palette balanced like a judge's scale. A Ptolemaic-era statue shows him holding an Ankh symbol of life in one hand and a papyrus scroll in the other, embodying the dual edge of wisdom. It can enlighten or destroy. Digital reconstructions of Neferkaptah's tomb sometimes animate his ghostly figure, lips moving soundlessly as if still chanting forbidden spells. The Book of Thoth endures because it speaks to our deepest paradox. We yearn for the secrets of the universe, even as we fear what knowing them might cost. Every scientific breakthrough, every cracked code, carries an echo of Neferkaptah's gamble. the thrill of discovery shadowed by the question, were we meant to see behind the curtain? Thoth's book may be myth, but the warning is real. Some doors once opened can't be closed. The walls of Uruk trembled under Gilgamesh's grief-stricken roars. His beloved Enkidu, wild-born, god-touched, his equal in battle and brother in soul, lay lifeless on the banks of the Euphrates, his body stiffening as Gilgamesh clutched him for 6 days, refusing to let go until maggots fell from the corpse's nose. In that moment, the mighty king who had once laughed at death realized his own mortality. If Enkidu, half divine like himself, could perish, what hope was there for any man? Thus began history's first epic quest, not for gold or glory, but for the one treasure no mortal could claim: eternal life. Gilgamesh's journey reads like a fever dream of desperation. He crossed the waters of death with the ferryman Urshanabi, surviving scorpion men whose gaze brought instant death. He climbed the twin peaks of Mashu, where the sun plunged into darkness each night. Finally, he found Utnapishtim, the Mesopotamian Noah, the only mortal the gods had granted immortality. Here, the story fractures into mirrors. Utnapishtim recounts surviving a world-engulfing flood by building an ark at divine command, loading it with animals and craftsmen, and releasing a dove to find land, a narrative etched in cuneiform centuries before Genesis was written. The parallels are too stark to ignore. Divine wrath, a chosen survivor, a rainbow promise, or in Utnapishtim's case, a necklace of lapis lazuli the gods gifted as remembrance. But immortality, Utnapishtim reveals, was a one-time exception. Instead, he offers Gilgamesh a cruel test: stay awake for 7 days, matching the god's rest cycle. The king fails instantly, sleeping like a dead man until Utnapishtim's wife bakes loaves beside him, each moldering loaf marking a day past. As a final taunt, Utnapishtim tells him of a rejuvenating plant at the river's bottom. Gilgamesh retrieves it, only to have a serpent steal it while he bathes, explaining why snakes shed their skins in symbolic rebirth while humans wither. The cuneiform tablets preserving this tale are themselves artifacts of endurance. Zoom in on the Yale Babylonian Collection's Deluge tablet, its wedge-shaped marks pressed into clay over 4,000 years ago. The lines describing the flood's terror, the gods cowered like dogs, still bear the scribe's fingerprints. The British Museum's Gilgamesh Dream Tablet, looted during the Iraq War and recently repatriated, contains the heroes' haunting visions of the underworld. Dust is their food, clay their sustenance. These aren't just words, they're time capsules of human dread. What makes Gilgamesh timeless isn't his failure to cheat death, but what he learns in trying. Returning to Uruk empty-handed, he gazes at its towering walls, the very ones he once built through forced labor, sparking the gods to create Enkidu as his conscience. Now he understands their true purpose, not as monuments to his ego, but as legacies that outlive flesh. The epic's closing lines, preserved on a broken tablet, whisper this revelation: life which you seek you will never find. For when the gods created man, they let death be his share. Modern excavations at Uruk reveal a city shaped by this duality. Archaeologists found the remains of its massive walls alongside graves where skeletons clutch clay tablets, hoping, perhaps, to carry Gilgamesh's story into the afterlife. Animated reconstructions show the plant serpent slithering away with stolen immortality, its body shedding skin in an endless loop. Even today, the epic's themes resonate, from the grief-stricken fury of Achilles to Wolverine's immortal exhaustion in Logan. Gilgamesh's quest wasn't just about living forever. It was about learning what makes a life worth remembering. The gates of the underworld groaned as Ishtar, the Babylonian goddess of love and war, pounded her jeweled fist against their unyielding surface. Unlike Orpheus, who descended to reclaim a lost love, Ishtar stormed into the realm of her sister Ereshkigal with no humility, only rage and entitlement. This wasn't a plea, it was a siege. Every step she took past the 7 gates of the underworld forced her to shed another piece of her divine regalia, her crown, her earrings, even the garments clinging to her skin. By the time she stood naked before Ereshkigal's throne, the queen of the dead saw not a goddess but an intruder, and unleashed her wrath. Ishtar's lifeless body hung from a hook like butchered meat, her absence plunging the world above into chaos. The myth's brilliance lies in its inversion of the Orpheus tale. Where Orpheus's love compelled him to negotiate with death, Ishtar's arrogance shattered the balance between worlds. The moment she crossed the threshold, fertility withered. Bulls refused to mount cows, crops failed to sprout, and human desire itself flickered out like a guttered lamp. The gods, panicking at the collapse of the natural order, sent a eunuch to bargain for her release. Ereshkigal agreed but demanded a replacement. Ishtar, freshly resurrected, callously offered her lover Tammuz to take her place, condemning him to 6 months of annual torment in the underworld. This wasn't just divine drama, it was a reflection of Mesopotamia's brutal agricultural cycles. Tammuz's imprisonment mirrored the barren summer months, while his return, secured by his sister's sacrifice, heralded autumn's rebirth. Clay tablets from Ur depict mourners wailing for Tammuz, their tears meant to irrigate the parched earth. The myth even bled into neighboring cultures. The Greeks knew Tammuz as Adonis, whose blood-stained anemones red each year. What makes Ishtar's descent so compelling is its unflinching portrayal of divine selfishness. The Epic of Gilgamesh shows her earlier, petulantly demanding the hero marry her, only to unleash the bull of heaven when he refuses. Yet this same goddess was worshipped as Inanna in Sumer, where priestesses reenacted her descent in sacred rituals, stripping away their robes to symbolize the stripping of the earth's bounty. Modern excavations of Babylonian temples reveal terracotta reliefs of Ishtar emerging from the underworld, her nudity not shameful but triumphant, a testament to cyclical renewal. To grasp the scene's visceral power, examine the Burney relief, often called the Queen of the Night. Though scholars debate whether it depicts Ishtar or Ereshkigal, the figure's taloned feet stand on lions, her wings spread like a raptor's, a deity equally capable of creation and destruction. Or listen to reconstructions of the descent of Ishtar chant, its repetitive lines mimicking the ritual's hypnotic cadence. This myth endures because it refuses neat moralizing. Ishtar isn't punished for loving, she's humbled for assuming the universe owed her passage. And in that humiliation, life finds a way to continue, not through divine benevolence but through uneasy compromise. The gates of the underworld never close. They wait, hinges rusted with the residue of every soul who thought they could conquer death. The cosmic ocean swirled with unimaginable depths as gods and demons gripped Vasuki, the serpent king, their muscles straining in an unlikely alliance. Mount Mandara, uprooted from the earth and balanced precariously on the back of Kerma, the divine turtle, became their churning rod. What force could compel sworn enemies, the Devis and Asuras, to work side by side? The promise of Amrita, the nectar of immortality, glimmered beneath the waves like a forbidden dream. But this was no simple treasure hunt. The churning of the ocean, or Samudra Manthan, wasn't just about reward. It was a masterclass in balance, sacrifice, and the price of enlightenment. As the mountain twisted, Vasuki's body groaned under the strain, his venom seeping into the waters like ink. The first treasures to emerge weren't golden or divine, but deadly. Halahala, a poison so potent it threatened to suffocate all creation. Only Shiva, the destroyer, dared swallow it, his throat burning blue forever as he bore the cost of salvation. Next came Kamadhenu, the wish-fulfilling cow, her udders brimming with sustenance. Then Varuni, goddess of wine, her intoxicating laughter a reminder that even gods crave indulgence. Finally, from the foam rose Lakshmi, her lotus cradled in one hand, her gaze radiating prosperity. She didn't simply appear, she chose. Floating past the greedy grasp of demons, she placed a garland around Vishnu's neck, declaring that true abundance favors those who act with wisdom, not force. Every element here pulses with allegory. The serpent Vasuki, coiled around the mountain, embodies the tension between opposing forces. Without his resistance, there's no traction for churning. The turtle Kurma, stable and unshakable, represents the patience required for transformation. Even the poison and nectar, emerging side by side, teach that enlightenment demands enduring bitterness to taste sweetness. Hindu texts like the Vishnu Purana frame this as the ultimate spiritual metaphor. The ocean is the human mind, the churning the discipline of meditation, and the treasures the insights revealed through perseverance. To visualize this myth is to witness cosmic drama on an epic scale. Animators often depict the mountain's slow rotation, its forests catching fire from the friction, as gods and demons heave in synchronized agony. The moment Lakshmi emerges, draped in gold, contrasts starkly with the Asura's later betrayal when they steal the Amrita, only for Vishnu, disguised as the enchantress Mohini, to trick them into drinking mere illusion. Temple carvings across India, like those at Angkor Wat, freeze-frame these scenes in stone, the serpent's coils echoing the cyclical nature of struggle and reward. This myth doesn't just belong to antiquity. Modern yoga practices invoke Kurma's steady posture. Corporate trainers use the churning as a metaphor for collaboration. Even environmentalists note its warning. The ocean yielded both poison and nectar, just as human progress often births destruction alongside innovation. The Samudra Manthan asks us, what are we willing to endure for our own immortality? And when the treasures surface, will we be wise enough to choose the right ones? The jungle leaves whispered warnings as Rama, Prince of Ayodhya, stepped into his 14-year exile, his loyal wife Sita and devoted brother Lakshmana by his side. Stripped of his throne by palace intrigue, Rama carried himself with the quiet dignity that would define his legend, not as a warrior seeking vengeance, but as a man whose honor outweighed even kingship. But fate had darker trials in store. Across the ocean in Lanka, the demon king Ravana schemed, his 10 heads plotting the ultimate blasphemy, the kidnapping of a goddess incarnate. When Sita glimpsed a golden deer, actually Ravana's sorcerer uncle in disguise, her childlike wonder lured her beyond the protective circle Lakshmana had drawn. The earth itself seemed to scream as Ravana's chariot tore through the sky, Sita's saffron sari fluttering like a captured flag. This wasn't just an abduction, it was the spark that would ignite one of Hinduism's most revered epics, the Ramayana. The story's power lies in its duality. Rama's quest to rescue Sita becomes a metaphor for the soul's journey toward Dharma, while Hanuman, the monkey god devotee, emerges as its beating heart. When Hanuman leaped across the ocean to Lanka, his tail setting the golden city ablaze, he wasn't merely a messenger. He embodied unwavering faith. His discovery of Sita beneath the Ashoka tree, her resolve unbroken despite months of captivity, became an archetype of endurance. Sculptures from Cambodia to Java immortalize this moment, Sita's bare foot tracing a line in the earth as she refuses Ravana's advances, her defiance as sharp as Rama's arrows. The Ramayana's cultural reach is staggering. In Thailand's Ramakien, Ravana becomes Tosakanth, a tragic figure whose love for Sita borders on worship. Indonesian Wayang Kulit's shadow puppet stretches 20 arms into a terrifying silhouette, their perforated leather casting intricate patterns when backlit, a visual metaphor for the interplay of light and darkness. Even Bali's Kekak fire dancers reenact the burning of Lanka, 100 men chanting Kak in hypnotic rhythms as dancers circle flames. These adaptations aren't mere retellings, they're proof of the epic's fluid genius, absorbing local flavors while preserving its core, the triumph of righteousness but at a cost. Because Rama's victory is bittersweet, when Sita finally walks through fire to prove her purity, a trial later additions to the text suggest Rama demanded, "The flames part like respectful servants." Yet whispers of doubt linger, forcing her eventual return to Mother Earth. This ending haunts modern retellings. Feminist readings question whether Sita was ever truly saved, while dullard interpretations see her as a subaltern figure crushed by patriarchal expectations. To witness the epic's visual splendor, seek out Wayang Kulit performances online, where Hanuman's puppet leaps with acrobatic grace, or explore Angkor Wat's bas-reliefs, where Rama's army of monkeys clashes with demons in stone. The Ramayana endures because it refuses to be just a hero's tale. In Rama's exile, we see the pain of unjust power. In Sita's abduction, the vulnerability of devotion. And in Hanuman's flight, the truth that sometimes faith moves mountains or burns cities to bring light back to the world. The smell of blood and wet earth hung thick over Kurukshetra as Arjuna, greatest archer of his age, dropped his bow and sank to his knees in the chariot. Warriors from both sides, his own cousins, teachers, even grandfathers, stood ready to slaughter one another at dawn. His hands, once steady enough to split a flying arrow midair, now trembled with existential dread. "How can I strike those I once worshipped?" he begged his charioteer, Krishna. This victory would be drenched in sin. What followed wasn't just divine counsel, it was a philosophical detonation that would echo for millennia. The Bhagavad Gita, a 700-verse hymn nestled in the Mahabharata's epic sprawl, transformed a battlefield into the ultimate classroom. Krishna's response shattered Arjuna's paralysis with cosmic perspective. He revealed his Vishvarupa, a universe-spanning form where time itself devoured warriors mid-stride, proving their fates were already sealed. "You grieve for those who cannot die," he thundered, not as friend but as the supreme Brahman. The Gita's genius lies in its layered teachings. Act without attachment to results, karma yoga. Devote oneself to divine will, bhakti yoga. And discern reality's fabric through wisdom, jnana yoga. When Krishna declares, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds," he isn't threatening, he's revealing the inevitability of change, the illusion of control. Centuries later, Gandhi would call the Gita his spiritual dictionary, interpreting its call to righteous action as nonviolent resistance. He carried a dog-eared copy during his salt marches, seeing British oppression as another Kurukshetra where truth itself was the weapon. Oppenheimer, quoting Krishna's line after the atomic bomb's test, showed how the text's morality could bend under modern horrors. Even today, Silicon Valley executives dissect its passages on focused action, while yoga studios distill its wisdom into Instagram mantras. The Gita's endurance springs from its refusal to simplify. Arjuna never gets absolution for killing kin, just the harsh clarity that avoiding duty causes greater harm. To see its visual power, examine Mughal-era miniatures where Krishna's blue skin bleeds into galaxies, or modern animations where his cosmic form flickers between terrifying and transcendent. This wasn't philosophy to ponder in quiet halls. It was and remains a mirror held to every impossible choice where doing nothing is often the gravest sin of all. In the beginning, before the heavens stretched high or the earth lay solid, there was only a swirling, formless chaos, a cosmic egg cradling the sleeping giant Pangu. For 18,000 years he grew inside that shell, his limbs pressing against the darkness until, with a roar that shattered eternity, he burst free. His first act was to split the murky void in two. The lighter half rose to become the sky, the heavier half sank to form the earth, but creation demanded more than a single gesture. Pangu stood between them, arms straining, feet planted, growing taller each day to push the sky farther from the earth. For another 18,000 years he held them apart, his body stretching like the trunk of a sacred cedar until the distance between heaven and earth was fixed. And when at last his strength faded, his body didn't simply collapse, it transformed. His breath became the wind and clouds, his voice the rolling thunder. His left eye brightened into the sun, his right eye cooled into the moon. The rivers and oceans spilled from his sweat, while his veins twisted into roads and footpaths. His flesh nourished the soil, his bones hardened into mountains, and the fleas on his skin scattered as animals and fish. even his final sigh became the first breeze to rustle through forests of bamboo, whispering the secret of balance to the world he'd birthed. This myth isn't just a story, it's a philosophy carved in cosmic imagery. Unlike the Norse Ymir, whose slaughter by Odin was an act of violent dominion, Pangu's sacrifice was voluntary, his body dissolving as an act of generosity. Early Chinese ink paintings capture this duality with startling grace. Brushstrokes of ink wash show his beard scattering as stars, his limbs melting into mountain ranges, the empty spaces on the silk embodying the Taoist principle of Wu Wei, the power of effortless action. A 16th-century Ming Dynasty scroll in Beijing's Palace Museum depicts Pangu with a serpent coiled around his legs, symbolizing the unbroken cycle of creation and dissolution, while misty voids suggest the harmony of yin and yang. The parallels with other global creation myths are as revealing as the differences. The Babylonian Tiamat's split body, the Greek Gaia rising from chaos, even the modern scientific Big Bang all share that moment where order emerges from primordial soup. But Pangu's tale stands apart in its lack of conflict. There's no warring pantheon, no vengeful deity, just a quiet giant who shapes the world through sheer endurance. Modern scholars trace this to ancient agrarian values. The myth mirrors the patient labor of farmers whose toil coaxes life from the earth season after season. To fully grasp Pangu's legacy, examine the Huangdi Yinfu Jing, a Taoist text comparing his body to the 5 sacred peaks of China. Or watch modern animations like The Legend of Pangu, where his death throes send shockwaves through the newly formed earth, each tremor birthing a valley or river. Even today, temples in Guangdong province celebrate Pangu's birthday, offering steamed buns shaped like mountains, a delicious reminder that every grain of rice owes itself to a giant sacrifice. His story endures not because it explains how the world began, but because it asks what we owe to the things we create and what parts of ourselves we're willing to leave behind. The peach orchard of heaven trembled as Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, stuffed his cheeks with stolen immortality fruits, their juice dripping down his golden fur like liquid defiance. Born from a magical stone that cracked open under the primal forces of yin and yang, this wasn't just a mischievous primate. This was a being who had mastered 72 transformations, commanded the winds, and erased his name from the book of life and death. When the Jade Emperor offered him the celestial title, Keeper of the Heavenly Horses, to placate his chaos, Wukong soon realized it was a glorified stable boy's role. His response, a rampage through the heavens so audacious it made Loki's tricks seem like childish pranks. He sparred with Erlang Shen, whose third eye could pierce illusions, and fought entire battalions single-handed, his staff, the Rui Jingu Bang, elongating to strike stars from the sky. What makes Wukong's rebellion resonate across centuries isn't just its spectacle, it's the razor's edge between hero and menace. Like Prometheus or Anansi, he embodies the trickster archetype, challenging rigid hierarchies with irreverent wit. But where Western tricksters often rely on stealth, Wukong's power is brazen. He duplicates himself into an army of clones, transforms into a temple with his mouth as the door and eyes as windows, and even urinates on the Buddha's fingers after failing to leap past his palm, a cosmic gotcha moment that lands him imprisoned under 5 elements mountain for 5 centuries. His journey from anarchic rebel to repentant disciple in Journey to the West mirrors the Taoist ideal of balancing raw potential Hun with disciplined wisdom Po. To witness his chaos incarnate, cue up clips from the 1986 TV series, where Wukong's exaggerated eyebrow waggles and acrobatic pole vaulting with his staff make the pageantry feel alive. Contrast this with the darker 2014 film The Monkey King, where Donnie Yen's Wukong snarls through a neon-lit battle against the Dragon King, or Netflix's Legends of Monkey, which reimagines the tale with post-apocalyptic grit. Each adaptation grapples with the same question: is Wukong a liberator mocking pretentious gods or a force of ego needing redemption? His legacy swings as wildly as his staff. Manga like Dragon Ball's Goku borrow his tale and love of combat, while video games like Black Myth, Wukong render his transformations in photorealistic detail. Yet beneath the spectacle, his story whispers a timeless warning. Even the cleverest rebellion must eventually face the weight of its own consequences. The peach may grant immortality, but wisdom that takes 5 centuries under a mountain to learn. Darkness swallowed the world when Amaterasu, the radiant sun goddess of Japan, shut herself inside the heavenly cave Amano Iwato. Her brother Susanoo, the storm god, had spiraled out of control, shattering her rice fields, flaying her sacred horses, and hurling their carcasses into her weaving hall. The final straw came when a loom struck and killed one of her attendants. Grief-stricken and furious, Amaterasu barricaded the cave's entrance with a boulder, plunging the earth into eternal night. Crops withered, demons roamed freely, and the 8 million kami spirits of Shinto lore wailed in despair. This wasn't just a celestial tantrum, it was the unraveling of cosmic order itself. The gods' desperate attempts to lure her out became a masterclass in psychological persuasion. They staged a raucous party outside the cave, stringing up jewels and mirrors from the sacred Sakaki tree. But the true stroke of genius came from Aim no Uzum, the goddess of dawn and revelry. She overturned a tub and danced atop it, stomping so wildly her robes flew loose, sending the assembled kami into uproarious laughter. Curiosity gnawed at Amaterasu. Peeking through the boulder's crack, she caught her reflection in the mirror Yota no Kagami, a dazzling vision she mistook for a rival sun. As she leaned closer, the mighty god Aim no Tajikarau yanked the boulder aside, while a sacred straw rope Shime Nawa barred her retreat. Light flooded the world once more, and life surged back into the land. This myth isn't just a divine soap opera, it's the bedrock of Shinto ritual. The Kagyura dance, still performed at shrines today, reenacts Uzum's ecstatic performance, its rhythmic stomps and twirls symbolizing the restoration of balance. The mirror, one of Japan's 3 sacred treasures, sits at Ai's grand shrine as Amaterasu's embodiment, proving that even the gods can be swayed by vanity and joy. Farmers' Bon festivals, where communities dance under lanterns, echo this primal celebration of returning light. Archaeology breathes life into the legend. At the Tsubaki Grand Shrine's Amano Iwato replica, visitors glimpse the cave's narrow mouth where priests reenact the opening ceremony with torches and drums. The 8th century Kojiki text describes the event with visceral detail, Uzum's sleeves rustling like summer cicadas, the god's laughter shaking the stars. Modern animations like Noragami's depiction of kami politics riff on Amaterasu's duality, both life-giver and fragile deity needing mortal devotion. Why does this tale endure? Because it's not about forcing light back into the world, it's about coaxing it out through laughter, dance, and communal effort. Unlike solar deities who command their return like Egypt's Ra, Amaterasu needed reminding that the world was worth illuminating. Every Kagyura performance, every shrine mirror polished to brilliance, whispers the same truth. Sometimes even gods need to see their own light reflected in the eyes of others. The sky over Ulster turned the color of a fresh bruise as Cuchulain's body twisted into something no longer human. His muscles writhed beneath his skin like serpents, one eye sucking into his skull while the other bulged grotesquely from its socket. His famous warp spasm had begun, a transformation so violent it scrambled his bones into a living weapon. This wasn't battle frenzy, it was a cosmic glitch in the fabric of his being, a curse and a gift from his divine father, the sun god Lug. The stories say his hair stood erect with sparks crackling through it, his mouth stretched wide enough to swallow his own head, and a toxic mist rose from his shoulders, poisoning birds mid-flight. And in that state, the boy once named Setanta became what the bards called the Hound of Ulster, a force of nature unleashed upon anyone foolish enough to threaten his homeland. His exploits read like a hurricane's path. At 17, he single-handedly held off Queen Medusa's entire Connacht army at a narrow ford, his chariot wheels churning the river to froth as he decapitated foes mid-leap. The Tainbo Cuelge, the cattle raid of Cooley, describes the aftermath in visceral detail. Corpses stacked like firewood, their heads grinning from his chariot's rails, the river water clotting with blood. Yet for all his savagery, Cu Chulainn fought with a code. He never attacked without warning, never slaughtered the unarmed, and often wept for those he killed. That duality made him more than a Celtic Achilles. Where Achilles' rage was personal, Cu Chulainn's was sacrificial. He didn't just defend Ulster, he became its borders, his warp spasms the land's immune response to invasion. But even hounds tire. His final stand came not against an army, but through a web of Jesus' sacred taboos that bound his fate. Tricked into breaking one, eating dog meat, ironic for the hound, weakened by another refusing hospitality, he faced his enemies standing tied to a standing stone so death wouldn't claim him lying down. A raven, often linked to the Morrigan, the phantom queen of war, perched on his shoulder as his last breath escaped. Only then did his foes dare approach, lopping off his hand as a trophy until his loyal horse, Liath Macha, charged in grief, scattering them. Parallels to other legends abound. The berserkers of Norse sagas shared his battle trances, their foaming mouths and animal pelts mirroring his warp spasm. Like Achilles, he had a divine parent and a short, glorious life, but Cu Chulainn's tragedy cuts deeper. His foster brother Ferdiad, whom he slew in tears at the ford, haunts him more than any enemy. Modern retellings, like the graphic novel The Cattle Raid of Cooley, emphasize this emotional wreckage, the boy who outran his own shadow, only to be outrun by fate. To witness his legacy, visit the stone at Knockbridge, said to mark his death site, or watch the animations in Cu Chulainn, the bloody hound of Ulster, where his warp spasm contorts in nightmarish CGI. His story isn't just about rage, it's about the cost of becoming the weapon your people need, and the loneliness of carrying that weight until your body betrays you. The battlefield stank of iron and damp earth as the Morrigan moved among the slain, her cloak of raven feathers rustling with each step. Unlike the Valkyries of Norse myth, stern choosers of the slain who carried heroes to Valhalla, this Celtic goddess didn't merely observe death. She orchestrated it, a triple force of prophecy, violence, and sovereignty. The Morrigan appeared in Irish sagas as both a crow circling above the fray and a woman washing blood-stained armor in the river, her chants weaving the fates of warriors like thread through a loom. When she offered her love to Cu Chulainn and he scorned her, she didn't weep, she swore vengeance, engineering his downfall through riddles and Jisa until he faced his final battle with the certainty of a man walking into a snare. Her power thrived in ambiguity. Sometimes she appeared as a trio: Bodibi, the screeching war crow, Macha, the sovereign who cursed men with the pain of childbirth, and Nemain, the frenzied whisperer who drove armies to madness with her screams. Other tales merged them into one entity, her form shifting like smoke between maiden, crone, and phantom. The Tainbo Cuelge paints her most hauntingly. On the eve of battle, she materializes atop a standing stone, chanting a dirge that twists the guts of even the bravest warriors. Unlike Valkyries, who served Odin's agenda, the Morrigan answered only to the land itself. Her prophecies weren't just predictions, they were spells, shaping the future with every utterance. Archaeology offers eerie glimpses of her cult. At the Ribble River in England, devotees left offerings of weaponry and raven figurines, their beaks open mid-cry. The Cathmage Tuaird, an Irish epic, recounts her washing the corpses of doomed kings, her hands glowing like moonlight on water. Modern pagans still invoke her at crossroads, leaving black feathers and whiskey, a tribute to her dual role as life-taker and guardian of sacred oaths. What set her apart from other war deities was her intimacy with mortality. Valkyries glorified death in service to a higher cause. The Morrigan reveled in its messy, personal cost. Watch an animation of her from Celtic heroes, and you'll see her eyes flash not with fury, but with something far more unnerving recognition. She didn't just witness endings. She understood them down to the last shuddering breath. The air above Teotihuacan stilled as the gods gathered around the primordial fire, their shadows stretching long across the stone. This was no ordinary council. It was the moment of cosmic sacrifice, the pivot point between annihilation and rebirth. According to the Aztecs, the universe had already lived and died 4 times before, each era, or sun, ending in cataclysm. First came the jaguar sun, where giant beasts tore humanity apart. Then the wind sun, its people swept away in hurricanes. Next, the rain of fire sun, volcanoes drowning the world in lava. Last, the water sun, a flood so vast it swallowed even the mountains. Now, as the gods debated a 5th sun, they faced an impossible question: what sacrifice could sustain an entire age? The answer came from 2 unlikely volunteers. Tecusistecatl, a proud god adorned in jewels, stepped forward first, but when the flames roared, he faltered, recoiling from the inferno. Then Nanahuatzin, a humble god covered in sores, leaped without hesitation, his body igniting like kindling. As the fire consumed him, Tecusistecatl, shamed by his cowardice, followed suit. From their ashes rose Tenatia, the 5th sun, but his light wavered, refusing to move across the sky. The gods realized the terrible truth: this new era would demand endless nourishment. So they offered their own blood and later human hearts to keep the sun alive. The Aztec phrase for this sacrifice, Tlazakamati, not just thank you, but we pay the debt. This myth wasn't mere storytelling. It was the bedrock of Aztec society, encoded in the sunstone, often misnamed the Aztec calendar, where Tenatia's tongue, shaped like an obsidian blade, reminds us that creation requires destruction. The 5 suns aren't linear, they spiral, each collapse birthing a new iteration. Spanish chronicler Bernardino de Sahagun recorded the priest's lament: "We are the people of the 5th sun. Our time is borrowed. Every sunrise was a reprieve, every war and ritual a down payment on cosmic balance." Modern scholars wrestle with the myth's implications. Was it a justification for empire building, with conquest framed as divine duty, or a meditation on ecological fragility, where human survival hinged on reciprocity? The Florentine Codex depicts Nanahuatzin's transformation in vivid pigments, his diseased skin peeling away like bark, his ascent painting the dawn sky crimson. Meanwhile, excavations at Templo Maya reveal ceremonial knives still stained with iron oxide, the residue of millennia-old offerings. To grasp this cycle's weight, picture the new fire ceremony held every 52 years. As priests kindled flames on a captive's chest, entire cities extinguished their hearths, waiting to relight them from this sacred source. A single misstep, they believed, would unleash Tzitzimime starred demons hungry for the darkened world. Today's descendants, like the Nahua communities of Veracruz, still whisper Nanahuatzin's name during solar eclipses, fearing the sun might stumble. The 5th sun's lesson lingers. Civilizations rise not despite sacrifice, but because of it. Not the blade, but the choice to feed the light or let it die. Our era, the Aztecs warned, hangs by a thread of gratitude and blood. The ball court echoed with the hollow thud of rubber striking stone as the Maya hero twins faced their gravest challenge. Hunahpu and Xbalanque, born to avenge their father's death in the very same underworld that now sought to claim them, didn't just play for victory, they played for the fate of creation itself. The Popol Vuh, the sacred text of the K-adjective ICHE adjective Maya, recounts every heart-stopping moment, how the lords of Xibalba, the shadowy realm of the dead, demanded the twins navigate a series of deadly traps disguised as a simple ball game. Razor-filled chambers, bladed bats, and cursed equipment were just the beginning. but the twins wielded more than skill. They possessed the one weapon the underworld couldn't anticipate: ingenuity. When the Xibalban lords forced them into the House of Gloom, a pitch-black maze where torches extinguished at the breath of death gods, Hunahpu and Exbalanque didn't cower. They plucked feathers from a macaw's tail, setting them aglow like bioluminescent fireflies to light their way. In the House of Knives, where obsidian blades shot from the walls, they coaxed the weapons into stillness by whispering the true names of the metals, a power inherited from their grandmother, the moon goddess Exmucane. But the true test came on the ball court itself. The lords stacked the game with cheating specters and a ball lined with hidden spikes. Yet the twins turned their enemies' cruelty against them, using a poisoned ball to strike down the arrogant lords 1 death and 7 death, avenging their father's severed head that once hung as a trophy on Xibalba's walls. This wasn't just a sporting match. Every detail thrummed with cosmic symbolism. The rubber ball's trajectory mirrored the sun's journey across the sky, its descent into the underworld at dusk, its triumphant rise at dawn. The twins' resurrection of their father from his bones, sprinkling them with maize flour until he breathed again, tied the myth to the agricultural cycles that sustained Maya civilization. In murals at El Mirador and San Bartolo, artists depicted the twins emerging from the jaws of the underworld serpent, their bodies adorned with jade beads that sprouted into cornstalks. Even the ball court's architecture held meaning, the sloping walls framing the game as a portal between worlds, the stone rings representing the threshold of life and death. Modern Maya communities still honor this legacy. In Guatemala's highlands, the Ajit's spiritual guides retell the twins' story during planting season, scattering maize kernels like the twins scattered their father's ashes. The Pak Topak ball game, revived in places like Chichen Itza, pits teams against each other using only hips and elbows to strike the ball, a grueling test of endurance that echoes the twins' ordeal. Archaeologists have even found proof of the myth's visceral reality. Buried beneath the great ball court of Kaaba, they uncovered the skeletons of players sacrificed mid-game, their bones arranged in poses mimicking the Popolva's descriptions. The hero twins' victory resonates because it's more than a triumph of cleverness over brute force. It's a blueprint for resilience. When the lords of Xibalba burned their bones and ground them to dust, the twins didn't just return to life. They ascended as the sun and moon, eternal reminders that even the darkest night yields to dawn. The next time you shuck an ear of corn, look closely. Those golden kernels, they're not just food. They're whispers from the underworld, proof that life, like the ball in the twins' hands, always finds a way to bounce back. The waves crashed endlessly against the hull of Maui's canoe as he tied another knot in his grandmother's magical jawbone rope, his muscles straining against the impossible weight below. For days, he and his brothers had paddled into the deep ocean, far beyond where any mortal fisherman dared venture, until Maui finally dropped his enchanted fishhook, carved from the bone of an ancestor and baited with his own blood. What surged from the depths wasn't just a fish, it was Te Ika A Moi, the North Island of Aotearoa itself, its forests and mountains still dripping with seawater as Maui hauled it into the light. This wasn't just a feat of strength, it was an act of creation, shaping the very land from chaos. Maui's legends pulse with audacity. Unlike Hercules, whose labors were punishments for past sins, or Prometheus, who stole fire for humanity at a terrible cost, Maui's deeds were driven by sheer, unapologetic cleverness. When the sun raced too quickly across the sky, leaving his people no time to cook or work, he didn't plead with the gods. He wove ropes from coconut fiber and ambushed the sun at dawn, beating it with his jawbone club until it agreed to move slower. In Tahitian lore, he lassoed the sky to lift it higher so humans could stand upright. Even fire, that sacred element, wasn't beyond his reach. After watching birds carry flames in their talons, he transformed into a hawk, stole the secret from the volcano goddess Mahuika, and gifted it to humanity. though not without first outrunning her wrath as she hurled firebrands that became New Zealand's geothermal springs. What sets Maui apart from other trickster heroes is his blend of mischief and benevolence. Where Loki's pranks often spiral into catastrophe and Anansi's cunning serves his own hunger, Maui's tricks almost always uplift humanity. His failures, though, carry haunting weight. In his final attempt to conquer death by crawling into the goddess Hind Nui, Po's stomach to steal her heart, his laughing birds woke her too soon and she crushed him between her obsidian teeth. Here the stories diverge. Some say he perished forever, others claim he became the first ghost flickering at the edges of firelight. Either way, his legacy endures in the land itself. His fishhook, Mangaroa, still gleams in the constellation Scorpio, a celestial reminder that even gods can be outwitted. Compare this to Hercules' brute force heroics or Odysseus' strategic deception, and Maui emerges as something rarer, a demigod who reshaped the world not through conquest but through playful defiance. The Maori carving of him at Te Papa Museum captures this duality, half smile, half snarl, his eyes alive with the challenge of the next impossible feat. Disney's Mona softened his edges, but the oldest chants preserve his wildness. Listen to a traditional haka, and you'll hear his defiance in every stomp, his cunning in every rolled tongue. The waves that birthed him still whisper his name, not in mourning, but in celebration, because while Maui may have fallen, the islands he fished up still stand, drenched in sunlight he tamed with his own 2 hands. These 30 myths, each a thread in the vast tapestry of human imagination, weren't just stories. They were the first maps of meaning, carved into the dark by cultures desperate to explain their place in the universe. From Hercules' labors to Maui's fishhook, from the sorrow of Orpheus to the defiance of Prometheus, these tales gave shape to storms, love, death, and the flickering hope that even mortals could touch the divine. They built temples and toppled kings, whispered in the ears of poets and warriors, and seeped into the bedrock of civilization so deeply that even now, millennia later, we still walk paths they paved. Think of the echoes. Philosophers like Plato wrestled with the morality of Pandora's box. Revolutionaries invoked Prometheus as they fought for enlightenment. Modern psychology adopts terms like Oedipus complex and narcissism, proving these ancient stories still name the unspoken corners of our minds. And it's no accident that superhero films borrow so heavily from myth. Tony Stark's hubris mirrors Icarus, while Thor's exile to Earth is just another god's journey among mortals. Even video games like God of War and Assassin's Creed don't just retell these myths. They let players live them, swinging Mjolnir or battling Medusa as if the old gods never left. But here's the real magic. These myths aren't frozen in time. They bend, they adapt. The same tale of Osiris' resurrection that comforted an Egyptian farmer 4,000 years ago might inspire a modern artist painting about rebirth after loss. The Maya hero twins' battle in Xibalba resonates with anyone who's faced impossible odds, whether you're a student fighting for your dreams or an activist standing against injustice. Myths endure because they're not about gods or monsters. They're about us, our fears, our triumphs, the choices that define us when the world turns dark. So now we pass the torch to you. Which of these stories lingers in your thoughts? Is it Loki's chaotic genius, or maybe Amaterasu's return, reminding us that light follows even the deepest despair? Perhaps you're drawn to lesser-known tales, the Inuit Sedna who rules the ocean's depths, or the Yoruba trickster Eshu who teaches that every truth has 2 sides. Share yours in the comments or tell us which pantheon deserves a deeper dive, because the greatest power of myth isn't just in the telling, it's in the conversation it sparks across centuries. So let's ask one last question. When you stare into the darkness, which story guides your way?